There is growing interest in where our food comes from and how it's grown. More people are going to the restaurant or grocery store and asking the question, what is the ethical choice? I'm Charlie Arnot with the Center for Food Integrity, and I'd like to spend the next few minutes examining that important question. Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao has a dream. His dream is to provide each child in China enough milk every day. At the same time, in the United States, we're battling an obesity epidemic with more than a third of all adults classified as obese. Both of these are legitimate social problems related to food. Unfortunately, we're not having the kind of productive, balanced discussion that leads to long-term solutions. Instead, as Russ Parsons of the LA Times said in his January 2010 column, what we have are two armed camps deeply suspicious of one another, shouting past each other. We can do better. We are fortunate to have an abundance of food choices in the U.S. and across the developed world. I can buy my groceries at Whole Foods or Walmart, and I can have lunch at McDonald's or Chipotle or my local corner restaurant. Unfortunately, our discussion about food has disintegrated to the point that we seem to only be able to think about having controversial foods or controversy-free foods. That's a polarizing position that leaves little room for meaningful dialogue. Some suggest that a simple solution is to roll the clock back to a simpler time. But is that the ethical choice? Let's take a look. In 1950, the U.S. population was 154 million, and we had more than 5.5 million farmers. One farmer fed about 30 people. By 2010, the U.S. population more than doubled to 310 million, and we now have fewer than half as many farmers. But one farmer now feeds approximately 155 people. If the number of farms and the level of productivity had remained constant since 1950, there would be no food for anyone in the following states: California, Texas, New York, Florida, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, or Georgia. 151 million people, or roughly half the U.S. population, would have nothing to eat. It's difficult to argue that would be the ethical choice. The heightened public interest in food provides the perfect platform for an informed, balanced discussion of food issues. Let's start that conversation with a basic premise. The public has a right to expect farmers, food companies, restaurants, and grocery stores to act in a responsible manner, and those that don't should be held accountable. The new interest in food also provides two great opportunities for those in the food system. First, look in the mirror. If there are practices that can't be defended ethically or are inconsistent with consumer values, then those in the food system should take a leadership role in bringing those practices to an end. Second, we have to do a much better job engaging in a productive conversation about today's food and telling the story. So, I'd like to use a favorite summer treat, a BLT and an ice-cold glass of milk, to tell the story of today's food system. It all starts back on the farm, where the crops and animals are grown that provide the food that ends up on my grocery shopping list. Let's start our journey through lunch with milk. Stephanie Dykeshorn is a dairy farmer from Iowa, and like thousands of other dairy farmers across the country, she's focused on the health and safety of her cows and the quality product that ends up on the grocery store shelf and eventually in my glass. And the work of Stephanie's family and the dairy farmers before her allows today's dairies to produce more milk using fewer natural resources. Compared to 1950, they produce 63% more milk with 58% fewer cows. Improving efficiency helps keep food affordable, but it does much more than that. Compared to 1944, each gallon of milk generates 76% less manure, a 63% smaller carbon footprint, and takes 65% less water and 90% less land. Those remarkable improvements are not limited to dairy. In fact, from 1960 to 2010, the land required to produce all the meat, milk, and eggs for every person in the U.S. declined by 2/3. Now think about that. If you live in a home or work in a business built since 1960, there's a pretty good chance that it sits on land that produced food 50 years ago. We used 10 million more acres to grow all major crops in 1960 than we do today. Without these improvements, more of our remaining natural areas would be under plow, not in communities, forests, parks, grasslands, and recreational areas. That means today's farming practices allow us to produce more food using fewer natural resources with less impact on the environment. Now, back to the BLT and its wonderful combination of flavors. It all starts with crisp, smoky bacon. Kenny Brinker from Missouri is one of thousands of hog farmers who pride themselves on supplying safe, nutritious, affordable food. Compared to 1950, the U.S. produces 176% more pork per sow with 44% fewer sows. That means every package of bacon you take off the shelf today took less land, less water, and has a smaller environmental footprint than the package in 1950. Corn. It's a primary ingredient in livestock and poultry feeds across the country and in many other food products as well. Kurt Stiefvater is a South Dakota corn farmer who knows that his care of the land provides a legacy that he can pass down to his daughters or others so they can keep producing food for people all around the world. Today, we produce 333% more corn on 11% more acres compared to 1950. Again, more bushels with fewer resources and improved environmental performance. Lettuce and tomatoes provide the crisp, refreshing flavor that's a perfect complement to bacon in a BLT. One of the great pleasures of summer is picking tomatoes from your own garden. But when you can't do that, you can rely on vegetable farmers like Jason Ruhlig of Michigan, who loves being able to supply his state with healthy, fresh, and safe vegetables. When the weather turns cold in the Midwest, we can rely on farmers in warmer states like California and Florida to provide our produce. In Monterey County, California, they grow lettuce. And they do it very well. Compared to 1950, they have 12 times the production on 2.5 times the land. Better seeds and improved farming practices make it possible. Yolo County, California is known for tomatoes. They have 8 times the production they did in 1950 on only 3 times the land. Mayonnaise adds the rich, creamy texture and great taste to make the BLT a summer classic. And you can't make mayonnaise without oil and eggs. Eggs are one of the primary ingredients in a number of food products like mayonnaise. Harry Herbrook and his family have been producing eggs for generations on their farm in Michigan, and they want their customers to know how much care is given to each dozen eggs. Like the rest of agriculture, egg farmers now produce more using less. Compared to 1950, they produce 53% more eggs with 3% fewer hens. Who knew soybeans would be in my BLT? Soybean oil is used in food products like mayonnaise, and the meal is used in livestock feed. Vicki Coughlin and her family in Wisconsin grow soybeans, and she's proud that their farm is going to be providing food for a growing global population. Compared to 1950, soybean farmers grow 11 times more beans on 5 times the land. Bread. You can't have a good BLT without toasted bread. I have a recipe from a late uncle that's become a family favorite, and the primary ingredients come from wheat. Chet Ettinger is a South Dakota wheat farmer that gets a good feeling growing food, fuel, and fiber for others on his farm. Compared to 1950, we produce 69% more wheat on 6% fewer acres. Now, surely these remarkable improvements in productivity mean we can meet the world's growing global demand for food, right? Unfortunately, we're not even close to meeting the growing demand, and we have record-high food insecurity in the U.S. and growing challenges around the world. 14.7% of U.S. households were food insecure at some point in 2009, the highest recorded rate since the first national survey in 1995. Between 2007 and 2009, the number of U.S. households seeking emergency food from pantries rose 44%. And nearly 2/3 of the 30 million children who participate in the National School Lunch Program receive free or reduced price meals. We have record high food insecurity despite the fact that we spend a smaller percentage of our disposable income on food than any other country. Only a century ago, we spent half our income on food. The U.S. economy is struggling today. Can you imagine what it would be like if we still spent half our income on food? Yet there is much more to be done. Every day, 11 million people in the U.S. and 1 billion around the world go to bed without enough food. And by mid-century, the Earth will be home to 3 billion more people. Let's break that number down to put it into context. 3 billion people by 2050 means we're adding more than 75 million to the planet every year, or roughly the population of Iran. It's the equivalent of adding another Los Angeles and Chicago to the planet every single month. We're adding more than 200,000 every day, or another Philadelphia every week. That means we have to double food production by 2050. So how do we make that happen? How do we close the gap between what we produce today and what we need by 2050? According to Norman Borlaug, the father of the Green Revolution, we have the technology to feed 10 billion people sustainably. The question is whether farmers and ranchers will be permitted to use it. The World Wildlife Fund supports increasing productivity on the land already being farmed. Jason Clay of WWF says we'll have to double the number of calories produced on the same amount of land we use today if we want to protect biodiversity and our ecosystems. You've heard about some of the remarkable improvements we've made in productivity since 1950. We're currently increasing agriculture productivity at 1.4% per year. Not bad, but not nearly enough. If we're going to double food production and freeze agriculture's environmental footprint, we need to increase the rate of productivity by 25% to 1.75% per year, and the greatest improvement needs to take place in the next 2 decades to keep pace with the rapidly growing demand. If we can't close that gap and significantly increase food production by 2050, there will be no food for 300 million people, which is almost the current population of the United States. So, how do we get there? Well, 80% of production growth will have to come from the responsible use of innovation and technology, 10 to 15% from higher cropping density, and only 5 to 10% from expanding land used for farming. While it may be hard to believe, we have to produce more food by the end of this century than we have in the last 10,000 years combined. Now, hunger is a complex problem, and simply growing more food alone won't solve it. We need to improve access, education, transportation, and a lot more. But here is one fundamental truth. If supplies don't keep up with demand, prices will continue to increase, and those who will be impacted most are those who can afford it least. So let's put the magnitude of the challenge into perspective. On September 11, 2001, the world mourned the senseless deaths of more than 2,800 people, and an angry nation wondered how it could happen in the United States. On March 11, 2011, one of the 5 most powerful earthquakes ever recorded triggered a tsunami that resulted in the deaths of more than 20,000 people in Japan. According to the UN, more than 25,000 people, more than half of them children, die every day from hunger and malnutrition. That's more than all who died from the tsunami in Japan, and more than 9 times the number of people who perished on September 11th. Providing enough food for people around the world is more than a moral imperative. It's also a matter of national security. Meeting basic human needs is the foundation for hope and progress. And when people lose hope, they have nothing left to lose. So, where's the public outrage? Have we become calloused and numb because this happens every day? If so, what does that say about us as a society when we have the power to change it? These are challenging issues. We all want to do the right thing, but it's not always easy to know what's right when it comes to food. How can you be better prepared to answer the question, what is the ethical choice? There are 3 things that each of us can do to answer that question. Engage others in an informed dialogue about food issues and the need to produce more using less. Supporting food choice encourages a greater understanding that safe, nutritious, and affordable food can come from a variety of different types of farms and production systems. Encourage greater balance in both our discussion of food issues and our food choices. A balanced diet that includes a variety of foods is a sound strategy for good nutrition. Affordable food makes food choice and balance possible, and regardless of the food you choose, you have the right to expect everyone in the food system to act responsibly. Learn more about your food and understand the consequences of policy and market decisions. Celebrate the choices you make for you and your family, but consider the consequences of broader policy or market decisions that could limit our ability to grow more food. Decisions that limit our ability to grow more food will result in increased hunger in the U.S. and around the world, not just today, but for future generations. Finally, support responsible food production systems that allow us to grow the food we need using fewer resources to meet the growing global demand for food. Farmers all around the world are some of the most creative and resourceful people on the planet. If we give them the tools and the opportunity, they will find a way to meet the incredible demand for safe, nutritious, affordable food. And that's the ethical choice for people, animals, and the planet. I'm Charlie Arnot with the Center for Food Integrity. If you'd like to learn more about who we are and what we do, visit foodintegrity.org. If you have questions about today's food system and you would like answers from academic experts from leading universities across the country, please visit bestfoodfacts.org.